Hello, friends. We are interested in the geography of our views, so please like and write in the comments from which city are you watching us, and were there loud stories of betrayal in your city? Perhaps the next story about betrayal will be from your city, and we start. Will Carlyle was born and raised in America in a family that valued restraint, responsibility, and respect for other people's boundaries. His childhood was not remarkable. An ordinary house in the suburbs, a small yard along which an old German shepherd walked, several typical American rooms, where there were always upholstered furniture and large bookshelves lined with photographs and textbooks. Will's traditional parents did not encourage arrogance or overly demonstrative behavior. On the contrary, calm discipline reigned in their family, and the main value was the ability to behave with dignity. As he grew older, he inherited from them their strength of character and the ability not to openly demonstrate either fear or joy. From an early age, he was taught that public expression of emotions is sometimes perceived by people as vulnerability or weakness, and this likely shaped his later attitude towards the world. Will himself didn't consider himself anything special as a teenager. He loved sports, regularly ran on the school cross-country team, and was interested in encryption theory and in general everything that had to do with codes, algorithms, and electronic systems. In fact, even before he seriously thought about his professional future, he was already fascinated by complex calculations, computer projects, and anything that allowed him to immerse himself in analytical work. No one in the family shared his passion for computers as deeply as he did, but his parents respected his interests and tried to support him. At the same time, they instilled in him other values: hard work, concentration, and the ability to achieve goals. All this together became the basis for those qualities that later brought him into the armed forces. It is generally accepted that the choice of a military career is often associated with misunderstandings in the family or the desire to find harsh discipline and order in the service. But Will join the army not because he was looking for an outlet for some inner drama, but rather because he liked the idea of a structured world. He was attracted by the opportunity to work in a field where everything has a clear logic and clear orders, and high technology is woven into reality, giving it a special rhythm. In addition, he wanted to be useful to society. When it came time to go to college, he chose a program that partnered with the U.S. Air Force, giving him a realistic prospect of not only a college education, but also guaranteed service. Over the years of training and preparation, Will gradually transformed from a quiet guy who once ran on the school cross-country team into a strong, physically resilient, and psychologically stable man. The tough training only strengthened his character. He became even more isolated in his thoughts, but this did not stop him from interacting well with his colleagues. He was not a typical jokester leader, but rather showed himself as a person to whom everyone turned for advice or help. He didn't brag, didn't seek extra attention, and never complained about conditions. His colleagues eventually got used to the fact that Will is always a man of few words, but at the same time he manages to notice details that elude most. While still a cadet, Will participated in various programs related to cybersecurity, cryptography, and information systems protection. He quickly realized that it was in this area that he could realize his talent and his inquisitive mind. Thanks to his tenacity and ability to understand complex technologies for days, he gained the trust of senior officers. But at some point he felt cramped in the classical understanding of military service, where everyone is mainly interested in physical training or direct combat training. His mind worked differently. He saw invisible threats, knew how to predict potential vulnerabilities in network structures, and at the same time understood the psychology of people. It was easier for him to retire behind the monitor than to have intimate conversations around the fire. When he crossed the threshold of the training center and became a full-fledged officer, he was offered to work in one of the special units, where they paid special attention to cyber operations and covert missions related to information intelligence. Thus began an important stage in his career. He had the opportunity to visit different places and perform very confidential tasks. He never told almost anyone the details, and not because he wanted to hide something illegal, but simply understood the need to maintain secrecy. This part of his life left an imprint on his worldview, on his ability to notice nuances and maintain equanimity even when chaos was raging around him. Despite the fact that his military service is already far behind him, the habit of not showing emotions remains. Moreover, the transition from military discipline to civilian life strengthened his character in terms of self-control. Since retiring, Will has focused on cybersecurity in the private sector, so he became a specialist, valued for his ability to keep secrets and quickly find weak points in systems. The company where he got a job was developing complex software systems for the financial sector, and it was there that he gained a reputation as an indispensable professional who works quietly and efficiently. From that moment on, his daily life took on a slightly different dimension. He no longer had to wear a uniform, but the responsibility and inner alertness inherited from his army years remained. However, in addition to his professional life, he also had a personal one. Lauren, his wife, contrasted sharply with him in her character and lifestyle. She was born into a fairly wealthy family, where the concept of luxury was the norm. From an early age, Lauren was introduced to beautiful things. Her parents allowed her fashionable trips, branded jewelry, and clothes. She graduated from a prestigious university, mainly because her father wanted her to, but she herself never aspired to an academic or business career. She was more interested in keeping herself busy with more secular activities, traveling, spending weekends with friends, shopping, attending exhibitions, presentations, and all kinds of events. Lauren loved the centers of large cities, where the streets were lined with fashionable boutiques. She could walk through shopping districts for hours, looking at shop windows, and then choose something that, in her opinion, would definitely make her life brighter. Lauren's acquaintances joked that she would never wear the same dress twice if there was a reason to show off something new on the horizon. She liked luxury hotels with spas, restaurants with famous chefs, and elegant lobbies decorated with arrangements of fresh flowers. It was there that she felt in her element. She needed chic, brilliance, an atmosphere of lightness, the opportunity to order her favorite cocktail and enjoy a casual atmosphere, knowing for sure that all this was proof of her special position. The difference in Will and Lauren's lifestyle was striking, and many people wondered how they got together and became a family. But there was one important circumstance. They had a common core, the desire for independence, and to live exactly as each of them sees fit. Will saw in Lauren something like a bright fire that illuminates hidden corners. She could stir him up, bring him out of the zone of habitual silence. And although it often turned out that she was starting a noisy evening, and he stood on the sidelines and simply watched people, deep down he sincerely liked her, and he loved her openness to life. Over time, Lauren developed the belief that she was able to influence and control Will. Her confidence was part of her nature. She was used to the fact that desires should be fulfilled and circumstances could be adjusted to suit herself. In Lauren's eyes, Will remained a man who seemed strict on the outside, but inside, it seemed to her, he held on to her, depended on her approval, her beauty, her ability to create a holiday around herself. Part of this may have been true, since Will, despite his self-sufficiency, admitted that Lauren was endowed with some charm magic. He did not intend to argue with her habits, although he himself remained a very economical person, weighing everything, always reporting to himself about every expenditure. But whenever Lauren wanted a new designer accessory, an expensive trip, or a membership to an elite sports club, he usually silently approved it. Many did not understand this dynamic in a couple. From the outside, they looked almost like opposites in all everyday matters. While Lauren was enjoying another weekend in a five-star hotel overlooking the ocean, Will could sit at his laptop all night, working on other people's security systems, opening conditional locks, and strengthening virtual walls, where no one but him noticed the gaps. He was sure that everything has its price, including luxury and safety. Lauren didn't think too much about cyber threats, or even about money itself, because she was convinced that life was given for pleasure. It seemed to her that since Will allowed her to live the way she wanted, that meant she was in control of the situation. But, contrary to her opinions, Will had many deep thoughts and memories in his soul that he did not reveal. Sometimes, when Lauren walked around beauty salons or wandered through boutiques, Pictures from the past appeared in his head. Sometimes he remembered army training camps, hot winds in the desert, barracks with narrow iron beds, and old computers on which he practiced hacking conditional databases. He remembered taking psychological stress tests. I remembered the moments when I stood on the parade ground after hours of training and endured slightly sarcastic remarks from instructors who did not believe that a guy with a head full of computer ideas could show discipline. He proved them wrong, managing to show both physical endurance and the ability to think logically. He had one particularly powerful flashback, the moment when he was assigned to a unit involved in covert operations. There he was faced with more complex tasks than he could have imagined. It was necessary not only to understand complex schemes, but also to find an approach to people who often worked undercover. He recalled how he had to apply his analytical skills not only to computer systems, but also to figure out potential information leaks within the unit itself. It was a difficult period when he had to look through hundreds of files, correspondence logs, compare timestamps and physical movements, and then correctly and quietly report his findings to the command. At such moments, he became convinced that people who seem easy to control sometimes conceal very complex motives and secrets. Over time, this thought became something of a rule for him. Do not trust external manifestations, do not rely on simple assessments, but always look deeper. However, he never directly applied this rule to Lauren, believing that their relationship lay outside the logic of secret operations. He had feelings for her that were different from everything he usually found in those around him. He perceived her as a source of liveliness and levity, which he perhaps needed in order not to become completely immersed in his closed space. However, every time Lauren told him with a joyful smile that she was planning another expensive trip, he would just raise his eyebrows slightly and nod. Okay, when are you going? He could give her a credit card or fund her personal account without question. For him, it was a kind of exchange. She gives him an atmosphere of ease, and he provides her with the opportunity to be who she wants. And even though it sometimes seemed to him that Lauren was flitting through life, not noticing reality, he tried not to destroy her illusions. But how did they meet? After all, it is obvious that with such a difference in interests and lifestyle, the chance for acquaintance and further development of events seemed unusual. And this is where Will's memories emerge of the period when he was almost completing his active service and was preparing to transition to civilian cyber defense. He was scheduled to travel to an event in Washington, D.C., where he would meet with representatives from various departments and companies to discuss job prospects. Such a forum, in the spacious conference rooms of a luxury hotel, was usually attended by graduates of higher educational institutions, experienced military personnel wishing to apply their experience in a commercial environment, and simply investors in innovation. Will remembered that hotel, the lobby with polished marble slabs, huge chandeliers casting soft warm light, polite employees at the reception desk. He never felt very comfortable in such surroundings because luxury did not appeal to him. He was more comfortable where a simple chair, table, computer, and a couple of monitors were enough. But he understood that this event was of great importance for his future career, and he needed to demonstrate his ability to conduct business in any environment. It turned out that Lauren was at the same hotel that same day, but for a completely different reason. Her relative participated in a fashion show, which took place literally in the next room. Lauren came to support her sister and at the same time enjoy the atmosphere of this event. She loved the shows, glossy photographs, camera flashes, and conversations about the latest trends of the season. After the show, she decided to have a cocktail at the bar located in the spacious foyer, which combined several seating areas. There, in a half-empty lounge, Lauren noticed a man in a formal suit sitting a little to the side. He was flipping through some documents on his tablet, occasionally stopping to answer calls. There was something unusual about him. He did not look like a typical white-collar businessman, but rather like a man accustomed to clear instructions and solid discipline. She was interested in his serious appearance. Lauren has always been attracted to people with a mystery, those who do not try to shout about themselves at every corner. In this man, she detected precisely such restrained energy. Will at the same time noticed that a woman in a luxurious dress was flashing nearby, who could pass for a model from the cover. She examined the interior of the hall and ordered herself a colored cocktail. It seemed that she already knew that she was making an impression and played on it, smiling slightly at her reflection in the mirrored wall. Will kept his eyes on his tablet, but his peripheral vision caught her every move. He was curious about the lives of such people for whom the whole world is a stage. It so happened that they had to approach the bar at the same time. Lauren ordered a second drink, and Will decided to grab some water to refresh himself after the long negotiation session. They made eye contact, and she smiled. At the conference, too, he nodded briefly. Yes, there are business meetings here. Word for word, it turned out that the event where he came was located in the next room, and she was at a fashion show. Lauren and Will suddenly became stuck in conversation. She was in high spirits and was talking about her impressions of the fashion show, and he, although he did not show much enthusiasm, listened politely and asked clarifying questions. Lauren always appreciated when her conversation was listened to seriously. Even if it was about the intricacies of the latest clothing collections, which a man usually did not know about, she saw that Will did not interrupt, did not grimace, did not brush aside, but was really trying to capture the essence and her mood. His answers were laconic. I see, it's interesting, it should be beautiful. But he still made small digressions, asking what other places she had visited, how often she attended such shows. In response, Lauren exchanged several questions about his activities. He mentioned serving in the military and that he was currently looking for a job in cybersecurity. She, of course, only understood in general terms what it was, but decided that it was somewhat similar to spy computer games, and she laughed cheerfully. You probably have spy stuff there in real life. Will raised the corners of his lips mysteriously, sort of. Their acquaintance began with this short dialogue. At first glance, they could have parted ways, barely wishing each other good luck and going about their business. But Lauren was keen and wanted to continue the conversation. She invited him to walk around the hotel, look at the lobby filled with fashionistas and bloggers. She was curious to show him the other side of this event. Will did not refuse, although he felt out of place. However, curiosity got the better of him. He rarely communicated with someone who spoke so easily and confidently about fashion, beauty, luxury, without trying to embellish or justify himself. Surprisingly, that evening Lauren did not seem empty or frivolous to him. On the contrary, there was a sincerity in her open manner of speaking that literally shone. He saw that she lived in some kind of her own world of bright colors, where small worries could be put off until tomorrow, and all difficulties were solved with one click of a button. If for him solving problems meant painstaking work on code, analyzing data, calculating risks, then for her it was simply turning to someone who could fulfill his next whim. And for some reason he didn't find it repulsive, rather funny. That evening they exchanged phone numbers, and Lauren promised him that they would see each other again someday. She did not give an exact date, and Will was not sure that this contact would develop into something serious. But the next day he still received a message from her inviting him to have coffee before she went home. He agreed, and they met in a small coffee shop outside the hotel, away from the bustle. There, at a table by the window, they talked more openly. Will, remaining taciturn, talked about his studies in college, about how he trained and wrote codes, about how he valued calmness and the ability to analyze in life. Lauren, on the contrary, loved to describe her feelings as if she were doing a report for a glossy magazine. Oh, these fragrant muffins literally melt me. Or, look how wonderful the light is today, I immediately want to take a photo. This meeting became a kind of clash of opposites. But what is often fascinating about people is what is different from us. After coffee, they parted, agreeing that they would continue talking when we'll finish the conference. Lauren returned to her normal life, full of plans related to entertainment and fashionable events, and Will completed interviews with potential employers, choosing the most promising options for himself. Soon they had the opportunity to meet again. This time Will was already in another city at meetings, and Lauren herself offered to fly in to keep him company. And although Will believed that they would have absolutely nothing to talk about except superficial topics, in reality it happened differently. She brightened up his everyday life by telling him the latest gossip news, and he taught her little tricks for protecting accounts on social networks, explaining why it was important to come up with complex passwords. She thought it was something interesting and quite fun. Gradually, their connection grew stronger, although it looked funny from the outside. They were in no hurry, but it soon became clear that they were really good together. Lauren admired Will for her ability to enjoy life. She talked a lot, laughed loudly, could spend a lot of money on trinkets just for the sake of the mood, but at the same time she remained strangely sincere. It seemed to him that she was almost a child in the big world, naive, and at the same time possessing some kind of witchcraft charm. And she, in turn, felt that she was safe next to him. His restrained strength, developed by years in the army, gave her confidence that everything would eventually be under control. Those few months of meetings and calls were followed by a more serious decision. They decided to get married. At that time, Will was already forming a specific plan: to leave the army on a long service pension and move to a contract related to cybersecurity in a large company. Lauren, for her part, saw no obstacles to marriage. On the contrary, it seemed to her that this was one of the most romantic stories that she would retell to her friends. "I met a military computer security specialist, so mysterious and reliable." That's exactly what she liked to say. The wedding was relatively small by Lauren's standards, but to Will it still looked quite luxurious. However, he allowed her to choose the format: white tablecloths, gourmet dishes, floral arrangements of roses and lilies. At the ceremony, Lauren shone in a designer dress, and Will seemed a little lost in all this pomp, but invariably maintained an even posture and a calm expression on his face. His brothers in arms who came to the wedding joked that he looked the same as at the awards ceremony: restrained, firm, and at the same time as if ready to take commands at any moment. Several years have passed since then, and each passing day has strengthened the contrast between them. Lauren led an active social life, surrounded herself with bright impressions, shopped in expensive boutiques, and flew to luxury hotels for weekends. Will built a career in the private sector, constantly studied, engaged in self-development, and easily mastered the latest advances in technology. He never ceased to be the same person who was accustomed to maintaining silence and inconspicuousness, as if working in the shadows. Lauren shone like the spotlight of the podium, always in sight. Nevertheless, no matter how different their morals were, they remained a couple, bound by their own logic of relationships. Lauren sincerely believed that she was in charge of everything, because she was the one who made the decisions where to live, how to arrange the house, what events to attend, and when to organize joint trips to resorts. Will looked like a man who silently agreed in the shadows, casting only a shadow of doubt if something went beyond the bounds of reason. But in the end, he almost always gave in. She rejoiced at this state of affairs, not doubting for a second that she was in control of everything. However, Will had his own world, hidden from her. It wasn't that he was keeping secrets from her or leading a double life, far from it. He was simply taught not to give away his thoughts completely and to always observe what was happening. Sometimes, when he returned home from work in the evening, he watched with a smile as Lauren unpacked expensive bags from boutiques and talked about what brand of bags she had discovered this time. He listened silently, asked if she was happy with the purchase, and discreetly assessed her emotions. Sometimes he noticed that her eyes glowed a little brighter than usual when she talked about a new handbag or earrings, and involuntarily compared this shine with what he saw at night exercises in an army camp, where the sparks of the fire were reflected in the eyes of tired but inspired colleagues. Some might say that their life was stable and predictable. He works, she spends, they occasionally go to resorts where she prefers a luxury vacation, and he continues his business, hiding behind a laptop under an umbrella on the beach or in a hotel lobby bar. However, no one ever saw dissatisfaction or resentment on his face. Everything seemed to be going smoothly. Lauren felt like she was in charge, confident that she was getting everything she wanted. And Will at that time had many memories of those days when he was on the real front line, be it figuratively, be it during exercises, which often took place in circumstances as close as possible to combat conditions. He remembered how helicopters sometimes made noise overhead, how he had to quickly respond to potential threats, how his science and experience were appreciated by the most unexpected people. He also remembered the first time he realized that his work in the shadows allowed him to see what was hidden from most. And this concerned not only technology, but also human secrets. He often had to notice which of his colleagues fell into excessive chatter, who was prone to boasting, and who was hidden to the extreme. It was then that he learned to be the same, always reserved, always quiet, but seeing a little more. When he met Lauren, it seemed to him that there were no hidden corners in her, that she was open and simple as she was. Her difficulties boiled down only to what outfit she would wear today, what necklace would go with her dress, what place she would choose for her vacation. But over time, we'll notice that she also had her own ability to lead the conversation in the direction she wanted, to charm and force others, including himself, to follow her mood. True, at that moment it didn't bother him, rather he even liked it. He believed that this was Lauren's charm making the world revolve around her. That's why he always seemed to meet her halfway, and she grew in her desires. Gradually, luxury from entertainment became a necessity, and expensive trips were no longer perceived as a rare holiday, but as something taken for granted. But we are not talking about this future and the details of their further relationship, yet after all, it is only enough to note that this is exactly how they existed as a couple. When Will remembers the first time he saw her in that hotel in Washington, he sometimes smiles to himself. After all, then he could not even think that this stately girl who adores high fashion would become his wife. He did not expect that his life, calm and structured, although full of secrets, would be intertwined with the bright whirlwind that Lauren personified. Memories of the army, of the harsh everyday life, of how he quietly immersed himself in codes and databases, contrast in his mind with images of the luxurious life into which Lauren involved him. And yet he does not regret his choice. Then, at the beginning of his journey, he was sincerely fascinated by her, as if he fell in love with her spontaneity. Some will say that Will, accustomed to being on guard, should have foreseen any difficulties in the relationship. But probably everyone, deep down in their souls, hopes that their personal life will be free from the strategies and combinations that they used at work or in the service. Will, a seasoned military and cybersecurity professional, made the logical conclusion: my job requires me to pay attention to details and look for vulnerabilities, but with Lauren I want to relax. And he believed that it would be so. No double play, no hidden intentions. Lauren believed that she had found a man who became a reliable support for her, but at the same time easily succumbed to her influence. She liked to be the master of the situation, because all her life she was surrounded by people who fulfilled her desires. Now she saw that it was possible to maintain control in marriage. She felt that since Will agreed to one of her ideas, he would agree to the second, third, and so on ad infinitum. She liked to think that she knew very well how to manage the situation. Will Carlyle sat in the corner of a coffee shop on the corner of 14th Street, where the smell of freshly brewed espresso mingled with the buzz of the morning crowd. His gaze was glued to the laptop screen, but his fingers did not touch the keys. The black coffee in his mug had long since cooled down. He watched, always watched. The woman at the next table was fiddling with her purse for too long, as if she was hiding something. The guy at the window nervously tapped his foot, looking at the door. Will did not miss a single detail, although his face remained as motionless as a stone slab. He was tall, lean, with short dark hair, touched with gray at the temples. The scar above his left eyebrow is a memory of a past he didn't talk about. He was wearing a simple gray jacket and jeans, nothing flashy. Will didn't like to attract attention. His work, the one left after the army, required silence. Cybersecurity wasn't just about code and servers. It was a war in the shadows, where enemies wore no uniforms and weapons were hidden in data lines. The coffee shop door dinged and Lauren entered. Her heels clicked on the wooden floor like a metronome, timing the time until the inevitable. She was wearing a long beige coat from some designer, whose name Will couldn't pronounce, and carrying a bag that cost more than his monthly contract. Blonde hair is styled in a messy but perfect bun. Lauren Carlyle looked like she had just stepped out of a magazine, and she knew it. "Are you in your den again?" she said, throwing her bag on the chair opposite and not even looking in his direction. Her voice was light, with a hint of mockery, but Will detected the familiar spark of irritation in it. "Work," he answered, without taking his eyes off the screen. His tone was as smooth as the horizon line. "Work, work." Lauren rolled her eyes and waved her hand at the waiter. "I'll have a latte with almond milk, no sugar. And hurry up, please." She finally looked at her husband. "Can you go out into the light sometimes? I was at Le Bernardin yesterday. Do you know how much a glass of champagne costs there? And you're sitting here with this mud." Will looked up slowly. His gray eyes met her brown ones, and for a split second Lauren thought he could see right through her. But he didn't say anything. He simply nodded, as if agreeing with something she didn't even know about. "How many?" he asked finally. "What, how much?" "Champagne." $120, Lauren snorted, leaning back in her chair. "And it was worth it. They have a new sommelier. He's just a genius. And you would probably order tap water." "Probably." Will stared at the screen again. His fingers finally moved, typing something so fast that Lauren couldn't even make out the characters. She sighed, pulled out her phone, and began scrolling through Instagram. The waiter brought her latte and Lauren took a sip, wrinkling her nose. "Too much foam," she muttered, but continued drinking. "Do you even know that we are having a reception at the plaza tonight?" I agreed with Caitlin. She will introduce us to the circle of sponsors of the new fund. "It's not just a party, Will. These are connections." "I know what connections are, Lauren," he said without looking up. "Then why are you always so?" She hesitated, searching for a word. "Distant. People think you're my bodyguard, not my husband." "Maybe it's better this way." Will turned his head slightly, and the corner of his mouth twitched. It was the closest thing to a smile Lauren had seen in months. She frowned, but did not pursue the topic. Lauren had gotten used to his silence, to this wall he had built between himself and the world. Sometimes she felt like she had married a ghost, but this ghost paid her bills, her trips to Malibu, and those $120 glasses of champagne. She thought it was a deal. He does his thing, she does hers, and everything is under control. At home, in their spacious Manhattan apartment, Lauren stood in front of the bedroom mirror, trying on a dress. Black, tight-fitting, with a cutout at the back perfect for the plaza. She turned around, checking how the fabric hugged her hips, and glanced at Will. He was sitting on the couch in the living room, again with his laptop, but now with headphones. His face was illuminated by the bluish light of the screen, and Lauren suddenly realized that she had not seen him eat today. At all. "Are you going to change clothes?" she shouted, adjusting her earrings. Already, he responded without turning around. He was wearing a black shirt and trousers, nothing too much, but enough to not look out of place among the elite. "Lord, Will, can you ever wear something with a twist?" Lauren walked out into the living room, crossing her arms over her chest. "You have that suit from Tom Ford. I chose it myself." "He's at the dry cleaners," he lied. Will didn't like suits. They restricted movement. Lauren shook her head and headed out, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. "Okay, let's go. And try not to be silent all evening, okay? People need to know that you are not just a shadow." Will closed his laptop, stood up, and followed her. He didn't answer, but his plan for the evening was already spinning in his head. Plaza is not only about cocktails and small talk. There will be people he's been tracking for a long time. People whose names appeared in the encrypted files he opened 2 weeks ago. Lauren thought it was her game. She was wrong. In the plaza, the hall was flooded with the soft light of crystal chandeliers. White-gloved waiters gilded among guests, serving canapés and martinis. Lauren immediately became the center of attention. She was laughing, touching the arm of a man in a tuxedo, telling a story about her last weekend in the Hamptons. Will stood to the side, by the column, with a glass of water in his hand. He didn't drink at such events. Alcohol dulled the reaction. "You're Lauren's husband, right?" A woman of about 40, with short red hair and a glass of champagne, appeared next to her. She was wearing an emerald-colored dress, and there was curiosity in her voice. "Will," he nodded. "Caitlin," she extended her hand, and Will shook it, briefly but firmly. "She was talking about you. She said you're mysterious." "She said that?" Will raised his eyebrows slightly. "Well, not directly," Caitlin grinned, "but I can read between the lines." "What are you doing?" "Cybersecurity," he answered, looking over her shoulder. In the far corner of the room, a man in a gray suit looked at Lauren for too long. Will took in his face, square jaw, thin lips, black-rimmed glasses. "Oh, it's fashionable now, right? All these hackers, leaks." Caitlin took a sip of champagne. "So you protect us from bad guys?" "Something like that." Will looked at her, but only for a second. "You're not very talkative." She narrowed her eyes. "Lauren warned me." "She knows me better than anyone," he said, and a hint of irony flashed in his voice. Caitlin laughed, but Will was no longer listening. Lauren never thought she would one day find herself in this position. She is used to considering life predictable and structured. Expensive boutiques, gourmet dinners, familiar with shiny business cards and wallets, and a husband who covers all her expenses without any questions asked. She always felt like she was in control of everything around her, including her own desires, and even more so that she controls Will. But David, whom she met a few years after the wedding, became an unexpected touch in this well-oiled picture. "Hello, can I help you find the conference room?" David addressed her in the corridor of one of the office centers. At first, it seemed like just a friendly gesture, but Lauren sensed something more in his smile, that undisguised attention that she missed around Will. "Yes, thank you," she smiled. "I can't figure out where to go here." "Then allow me," David pointed in the direction. "I just know all the nooks and crannies of this building. I'll show you a shortcut." David was different from her husband in literally every way. If Will was reserved, laconic, accustomed to solving any problems silently, then David, on the contrary, loved to shine. He spoke quickly and had funny comments for any situation. His colleagues liked him. He had his own way of encouraging the team-like jokes, a little posing, and everyone around him felt involved in the general process. Many of the women in the office made no secret of their attraction to David, and Lauren saw him quietly exchanging pleasantries with them. At first, she considered it a kind of entertainment. After all, no woman would refuse a pleasant flirtation, especially if this flirtation adds an element of spice to life. Lauren felt that over the years of living with Will, she had become accustomed to an even flow of days that was a little soporific. Their marriage was outwardly impeccable. She had a glossy picture on social networks. He had a stable income and a well-organized life. But she missed the feeling of the flash, the excitement. And David, with just his appearance, awakened in her that same feeling of interest, as if she were again on the podium and all eyes were turned to her. At first, everything happened almost innocently. Light text messages, pleasant, ambiguous jokes, a couple of meetings in a coffee shop on business. For example, when David suggested discussing some kind of exhibition or event where Lauren could appear as a special guest, she laughed a little at herself, realizing how easily she fell into other people's networks. But she reassured herself that it was just a game. "I think this event will be large-scale," David convinced her at a table in a coffee shop. "Well, if this is a really interesting exhibition, I'll think about it." Lauren raised an eyebrow, pretending to doubt. "Doubt does not suit you, Mrs. Carlyle." He grinned. "You have natural charm and will brighten up any event." One evening, while typing a message to David, she even thought, "If I erase everything now and don't send it, nothing bad will happen." But she sent it, and from that moment the connection strengthened. David began inviting her to dinners that lasted late into the evening. Lauren quickly became involved in these almost secret meetings. She liked to feel like she had a second world, a world where she didn't have to talk about credit card limits and new collections, where she could talk about her feelings, about her desire to take risks, about how sometimes she wanted to escape from routine details. David listened to her with genuine attention, sometimes giving compliments, sometimes light, sometimes quite bold. He had that same charisma that creates a festive atmosphere around a person. And it's been a long time since you've had such adventures in your life, he asked her one day at dinner. Lauren pretended to think. I don't even remember. Probably too long ago. She leaned slightly towards him. Do you know how to make every day special? I can, if I have a special person with me, David replied, not taking his eyes off her. With each new date, Lauren became convinced that all this was not just flirting. She felt a rush of adrenaline when she saw his name on the phone screen. I was waiting for him to write again. And of course, she understood that she was crossing the line beyond which her status as a happy wife could collapse. But so far the realities where Will is and this romantic second world where David is have not intersected. At least that's what she thought. Lauren believed that Will was too immersed in work and his own ideas to notice anything. After all, he still went into his office and could sit at his laptop for hours, checking security systems for clients. Sometimes he went on business trips, after which he returned just as silent and slightly aloof. Even at home, his attention was more often occupied by cyber reports or new projects. But sometimes she felt his gaze on her. She could stand in front of the mirror and put on makeup before going out, and suddenly she would catch Will's reflection in the glass bedroom door. Where today? He asked one day when he noticed that Lauren was choosing an overdressed dress for a casual dinner with her friends. Oh, we decided to go to a new restaurant in the center, she answered, glancing at him through the mirror. It's clear. He didn't interrogate, he just nodded briefly. Lauren was sure that if he sensed something was wrong, he would certainly ask a direct question or arrange an analysis. But the days passed, and there were no questions. To her, this was a sign that her plan to be invisible was working. However, Will had long noticed changes in his wife's behavior. He had years of army training where they teach observation and analysis, and also a sense developed over the years when something is wrong. He saw how Lauren's facial expression changes when someone writes to her in instant messengers, how she begins to glow differently, how she chooses outfits for a business meeting. I didn't know yet who exactly she had a connection with, but he wasn't blind. Will chose the tactics of silence and observation. He understood that if he threw all his suspicions on the table right now, he might receive a barrage of denial. After everything he went through in the service, he learned to understand. The real danger lies in the details, and emotions are blinding. So he observed, noted when Lauren left, what calls or messages she responded to most readily, what explanations she came up with. Sometimes he recalled technologies that he knew inside and out, hidden applications for activity analysis, geolocation tracking. But I was in no hurry to apply them yet, hoping that the situation would clear up on its own, or that Lauren will stop. David himself, meanwhile, felt like a winner. He saw Lauren as a woman who gave him confidence and thrills. Their secret meetings became romantic adventures, and Lauren's gentle purring in her ear was confirmation that he had managed to win the heart of a spectacular beauty. He didn't wonder what would happen next. He was content to play the role of a lover without commitment, and he believed that Will was too busy a guy in an it suit to notice hidden connections. Lauren, maybe we can go out of town on Friday, David suggested, leafing through the menu at the next restaurant. She sighed, anticipating the difficulty. Friday is a hard day, my husband is at home, and you can always come up with another important meeting, David grinned playfully. I don't think he will mind. You know, she brushed her hair out of her face. It's not that simple, but I'll think about it. David may not have realized that Will is not just a boring-it guy, but a former military officer who has undergone several secret operations. Will did not advertise his past achievements, and Lauren herself rarely spoke about her husband's service. Lauren, like that David, unlike Will, was ready to spend hours discussing her feelings, plans, possible trips. He spoke enthusiastically about his goals in management and mentioned connections with influential people. She was flattered that he saw in her not just someone's wife, but a person worth pursuing and praising. But sometimes Lauren, returning home after another meeting with David, noticed that Will was sitting too quietly and calmly in the living room. "Hello, is everything okay?" he asked in an even voice. "Yes, wonderful," she answered, unbuttoning her jacket and involuntarily looking away. "Glad to hear that." Will met her eyes for a couple of seconds. "If you want to talk, I'm here." At these moments, it seemed to her that he saw right through everything, but she immediately reassured herself. No, it's just his usual restraint. Will actually saw more than he seemed. He didn't make a scene because he realized that if the veil of secrecy was removed now, Lauren would simply shut down. He wondered if she was seriously interested in someone, or if it was just temporary fun. But for now, it seemed she had no intention of curtailing the affair. On the contrary, it seemed that she was blossoming. The methods Will was used to using were the methods of someone who had a history of surveillance and analysis. He always strived for accuracy. When Lauren left the house, he would sometimes quietly look to see if she had left notifications open on her tablet or laptop. When she returned, he could find out which accounts were active on her phone. It wasn't that he was intruding into her personal correspondence directly. He knew the laws of digital security too well. But there was enough indirect evidence. Geotags that pop up in photographs, strange pauses in call logs. One night, when Lauren was already asleep, Will quietly entered her dressing room. There, among the handbags and neatly hung dresses, he saw on the dressing table expensive earrings, which she usually wore only on big holidays. Lately, she wore them to almost every friendly meeting, and then took them off as soon as she returned. This indicated that meetings for her were not just an everyday routine. A cold wave rose inside him, an unpleasant feeling when you realize that your wife puts special meaning into what she is hiding from you. However, even then he did not make loud steps. He returned to the office and sat down at the computer. Codes and project diagrams were displayed on the screen in front of him, but he could not concentrate. Images from the Army's past surfaced in my memory night briefings, where it was necessary to silently analyze tons of encrypted information in order to give out exact coordinates by morning. He realized that he was still operating according to the same principle. Collect evidence, do not create noise, and do not give rise to suspicion. Meanwhile, the affair with David became more and more obvious to Lauren herself. She found herself unable to wait for the next meeting, trying to figure out how to find time and not raise questions from Will. She learned to say, "Darling, I'll go help my friend choose a gift. It might take a couple of hours, okay?" Will usually answered calmly, "No problem. Good luck," and returned to his business. Sometimes she thought, maybe deep down he was glad that she had something to do, because he had enough work. And she still held the belief that Will was too boring and busy to pry into her personal life. David, for his part, became even bolder. He tried inviting Lauren over. Sometimes they didn't have the patience to rent neutral territory like restaurants or hotels. Passion and thirst for new sensations overpowered fear. It seemed to her that she was in control of everything, just as she once controlled Will, instilling in him that all her luxury was just a small reward for women's joys. However, the reality was different. Will was not at all as hopelessly busy and naive as Lauren thought. From time to time, a feeling similar to dull resentment flared up in him. Although he knew how to control his emotions, he remained a living person and understood that this hurt him. "Why are you so late again?" he asked quietly one day when Lauren returned closer to midnight. She waved it off. "Yes, my friend delayed me. We were talking about her personal problems, sorry." He just nodded silently and walked away without developing the topic. He returned to the old question, what went wrong? Why didn't she share this feeling of boredom or monotony with him, but decided to look for new emotions on the side? But he did not want to organize total digital control against his own wife. Not yet. Thus, a tense silence reigned in the Carlisle house. Lauren lived a double existence. During the day and evening, she was Will's luxurious wife, and the second half of her life was spent in correspondence, secret meetings, and short bursts of passion. Will remained calm, continued to work, even joked with Lauren about small things when she was in a good mood. But behind this mask, there was a subtle thread of observation. He believed her excuses less and less, noticed inconsistencies, and noted the fact that Lauren's phone was sometimes turned off at hours when she was usually on call. Didn't raise your voice, and didn't interrogate. The best strategy for now is to pause and understand how deep it went. Over time, his confidence grew stronger. Lauren has a lover. All that remained was to find out who it was and how long it had been going on. Part of his mind whispered, maybe it's better not to know. Let everything cool down on its own. But his nature as a military analyst could not tolerate uncertainty. He felt the desire to take decisive action slowly brewing inside him, but he knew that every step had to be weighed. As soon as her romance with David began to gain momentum, she became resourceful. She began entering hotels through the back doors, using service stairs, negotiating with the receptionist to assign her room under a false name, and after meetings, carefully erasing all messages and photos from her phone. She liked the feeling of beating the system. Will, although a capable military specialist in the past, was, in her opinion, too busy with corporate projects to keep track of all her tricks. She even installed a VPN on her phone, taking advice from David, who once said that it's better to hide your tracks so that no one can track where you go or what you write. David laughed that this was a common precaution because they were both adults and could easily afford a secret affair if they could no longer be together. Lauren played along, agreeing that some extra backup wouldn't hurt. Listen, are you sure that the VPN works? She asked one day when they were sitting in a small restaurant on the outskirts of the city. David shrugged. Yes, I installed a good service. At least your internet traffic is encrypted so no one will know anything. It's just that I have a husband. He understands all these technologies. Lauren pretended to talk about Will casually, although there was a slight fear inside her. Well, it's still useless, David grinned. He doesn't have access to your passwords, does he? She quickly looked away. Lauren really never told anyone her passwords, and she changed them regularly, even since the times when Will himself insisted. Set complex options so that no one hacks your account. But deep down, she understood that Will's knowledge and resources were much more extensive than that of a simple amateur. He just never showed it off. So she tried to be extremely careful. That's why, when I locked myself in the bathroom, I always deleted messages and files from the chat with David. However, Lauren didn't take a few things into account. Firstly, she wore a new smart bracelet, which she herself chose as a stylish accessory. It didn't seem like anything out of the ordinary to her, an ordinary fitness gadget that helps monitor heart rate and physical activity. But it had a built-in GPS module, which by default transmitted geolocation information to the manufacturer's server. Will, as an experienced specialist, easily set up remote access to this data. Secondly, he secretly updated the firmware of Lauren's smartphone, installing a hidden program that allowed her to duplicate her correspondence and notifications. And finally, in their family home, as well as in Lauren's car, there had long been surveillance cameras outwardly unnoticeable, but quite effective. When Lauren went to her next meeting with David, she had a whole ritual. She left her tablet at home, took only her phone with her, threw out all the extra receipts from her wallet so that there was no incriminating evidence at home, and before entering the hotel, sometimes she even changed her shoes, putting on something simpler so as not to attract the attention of the staff. It seemed to her that such little things could save her from detection. I'll leave the car in the underground parking lot and take the elevator, Lauren whispered to herself. From there, I'll go out through the service corridor and go into the room where David is waiting for me. Her heart sank with excitement, and at the same time she felt a sense of triumph. After all, she had again outwitted all the conventional traps. But Will had been watching her for a long time. In his office at work, he could view the data in real time through an encrypted connection. As soon as Lauren drove away from home, a special program marked her route. The bracelet regularly sent a GPS signal. Sometimes she made a detour, driving through unfamiliar streets, hoping to confuse any possible trace. But Will's program saw it all on the map. So, he muttered to himself, looking at the diagram on the screen. moves to the west, then takes a roundabout route to the center, stops 2 blocks from the hotel. He zooms in and sees how the colored icon with coordinates freezes at the entrance to the underground parking lot. The car is locked in place. Let's see where she goes next. After that, he switched the tab to a hidden program on Lauren's phone and read her correspondence almost in real time. David, I'm already in room 1408. Get up quietly. Lauren, is the elevator working? I'm walking through the parking lot. David, yes, knock 3 times when you enter the corridor. Will saved screenshots so he wouldn't lose this information. He felt neither anger nor despair, but rather cold efficiency. Each time he only became convinced that Lauren had gone far. Doubts disappeared. He only wanted to understand how deep this connection was and how long their romance had been going on. At home, he also did not forget about the details of finances. All transactions on Lauren's cards went through a common account, and even if she had a personal card, she still left a trace in the electronic database. Will installed a special filter that checked the shopping list every evening. If any expense seemed suspicious, for example, paying for a hotel room, a flower shop, or a restaurant where they rarely visited together, the program displayed it in a separate report. Sometimes, in order not to leave direct evidence, Lauren asked David to pay for the room himself, but there were still a lot of details that came out. For example, she bought champagne from the minibar, and then it made its way through her loyalty card at a restaurant chain, where for some reason she was listed as a regular customer. Will studied all this without showing it. At home, he remained just as silent and polite. That evening, when Lauren returned from another shopping trip, he was sitting in the living room with his laptop. Lauren tried to act casual. "Hello, dear," she said, taking off her jacket. "Today, there is just crazy traffic in the shopping center. My feet are buzzing." Will looked up from the screen and smiled slightly. "Hello. Yes, the traffic jams must have been terrible. You've been gone for a long time." "Oh, don't say," she nodded and went to the kitchen for a glass of water. "How's your day?" "Okay, I figured out the code." He answered in such an even tone that Lauren sighed with relief. He looked impassive, not at all suspicious. She went to her room to change clothes, and Will followed her with his eyes. A recent email he'd read played through his head. Lauren and David spent 3 hours in room 1408, ordered dinner for 2, and then she ran to the mall for literally half an hour to pick up a few little things to justify her return. All this matched the GPS data, and he realized how professionally Lauren had created her second life. But against a cybersecurity specialist, she had no real chance of going unnoticed. David, however, began to realize that their secretive relationship was becoming increasingly risky. Sometimes he would send her messages in a nervous manner. "David, are you sure your husband doesn't notice anything? He can just go ahead and break through all our meetings." Lauren, "Don't exaggerate, he never looks at my phone, and I have a VPN, it deleted all correspondence." David, "VPN is not a panacea. Okay, let's be careful." However, these conversations slipped away from Lauren's mind as soon as David started talking about his feelings again or telling her how attractive she was. She loved to feel like she was in control of everything. She thought that she erased the correspondence every time she used a workaround, so no one would reveal it. But the cameras in her car recorded everything that happened in the driver's seat. The recording was made without sound, but you could see how she checked her lipstick in the mirror, how she looked admiringly at the phone screen, waiting for the next message from David. In addition, Will placed a small camera on the dashboard, which she mistook for a regular sensor. He could turn on the broadcast and see Lauren typing on her smartphone if the angle allowed. Sometimes he was even able to distinguish phrases written in the messenger. One night, Will sat in his office, remembering army briefings. Then, more than once, he had to sort through a huge amount of intelligence data in order to weed out false targets and identify the real threat. Now he was doing the same thing, but now the object of study was his own wife. He turned on the recording from the camera in the car for the last 2 days and flipped through several episodes. In one of the videos, Lauren, upon arriving at the hotel, takes off the ring and quickly puts it in her pocket. In another, he makes fun of himself on the phone, apparently answering David, "I can't wait to see your face." Will couldn't hear her voice, but he could read her lips and finger movements as she typed a message. A couple of times I was able to see the contact icon on the screen, David. When the recording ended, he ran the transaction logs. I found a payment there for a certain flower shop on the same day. By comparing the check-in time and GPS data, he realized that she had indeed stopped by there after the meeting. Maybe to take flowers for himself or for David, he didn't know. But in any case, the overall impression became even gloomier. Will caught himself thinking that never in his life had he felt such hopelessness and strange calm at the same time. On the one hand, the fact of betrayal burned my soul. On the other hand, his cold professional self spoke, "You must collect all the details before you act." The next day, Lauren made another attempt to increase the disguise. She decided to pay for something in cash, having first withdrawn a large amount from an ATM. It seemed to her that if there were no transactions on the card, then Will would definitely not know anything. But the cash withdrawal itself immediately showed up in Will's monitoring. Moreover, he noticed that she began to use other people's taxi numbers more often before her friend, and with her friend, as she herself stated. However, the GPS tracker in her bracelet still stubbornly recorded every movement. Lauren was happy to wear this bracelet because it fit perfectly with her new suit from a famous brand, and she never thought that it could serve as a beacon. That same evening, Lauren went to visit David under the pretext of a friend's party. She left the house with a short comment. "Will, don't wait for me early. We're having a bachelorette party. There's a lot of people there, and we'll talk until midnight." "Okay, don't worry," he answered in an even voice. "Just be careful on the road." Certainly, she nodded and quickly left. Will sat down at the computer, opened the map, and saw how the signal from her bracelet moved across the city, first towards that same friend, and from there in the opposite direction towards David. He watched her make one taxi transfer, then a second. It was clear to him that she was trying to throw off the scent of anyone who would follow her. But GPS technology left no chance. Very smart. He muttered, watching on the screen as the cursor changed direction, but not enough. Over the next couple of hours, he saw that her geolocation did not change, meaning Lauren was probably in David's apartment. At the same time, Will looked at what was happening in her instant messengers. She turned off the internet connection, most likely to not reveal the geolocation. But the program installed in the firmware of her phone regularly sent data to Will as soon as the connection was restored even for a second. Meanwhile, in David's apartment, Lauren felt relaxed, but deep down she felt a slight tension. Still, she hid too much. "I'm afraid, David," she suddenly said, sitting down on the edge of the sofa. "What if he finally gets wind of it?" David sat down next to her and put his arm around her shoulders. "Don't be afraid. Your husband is just a quiet, busy man. If he had suspected anything, he would have caused a scandal long ago." Lauren nodded, but her heart skipped a beat. "Just be careful," David added. "Don't leave evidence, don't keep our correspondence, and use a VPN like I said." She closed her eyes, deciding to drive away all bad thoughts. She wanted to believe that there would be no consequences. Will no longer had any doubts. The collected evidence would be enough for a whole dossier: videos, screenshots, geolocations, payment transactions. He knew Lauren's every move. But despite possible rage, he maintained external equanimity. In those rare moments when Lauren was home and began to talk about her day, he did not show that he knew all the details in advance. He acted as a calm listener. "Well, my girlfriends and I ended up sitting for a long time, chatting," she said one morning, sipping coffee. Will smiled slightly. "Understand. It must have been fun." Yes, everything is fine." Lauren averted her eyes. She could have said that and not noticed that Will had momentarily gripped the cup a little tighter than usual. He still remained calm on the outside, but on the inside he was already forming a plan. He did not want to continue living in an atmosphere of constant lies. but he wanted to clarify everything to the end, without unnecessary emotions. His army habit: first collect the complete picture, then move on to action. From time to time he thought, should I end the relationship immediately? Show her all the evidence. But he understood that this would only cause a flurry of hysteria, and she could deny the obvious. Or worse, it will become even more secretive and disappear, leaving behind ruins. Will didn't want this scenario. He wanted to understand why things had gone so far and decided to wait for the right moment to reveal his cards. Meanwhile, Lauren continued to live in the illusion of security. It seemed to her that she herself controlled connections, passwords, VPNs, entrances to hotels and apartments. She was proud of her ability to hide the affair, but she had no idea that almost every step she took had long been under the hood. Getting ready for the next meeting, she again thought that everything was under control. Will, I'll be gone for a couple of hours. I need to do some paperwork for a charity fund, she told him. He looked up from his laptop and nodded. Certainly. If you need help, call. Listen, she quickly replied, grabbing her purse and disappearing from the house. Following her departure, Will opened several windows on the computer: a program with a GPS map, a tab with duplicate correspondence, and monitoring bank transactions. A few minutes later, he saw Lauren, as if following a long-established algorithm, move towards the bypass road, then turn towards David's office. He notices the payment for parking, sees her SMS. In place. Tell me when to get off the elevator. All this has already become routine in his observations. The only difference is that Will is close to the point where his patience will run out. He didn't need more evidence, he had enough of it. He had no intention of going berserk because he knew the damage a thoughtless outburst could cause. But he also could not live in endless silence and continue to pretend that he did not see the daily betrayal. Soon he will have to dot all the I's. Lauren never liked surprises unless they involved gifts or stylish parties. But today she had to face an unpleasant surprise that threatened to turn her entire secret life upside down. Getting ready for her next meeting with David, she, as usual, felt excitement in her blood. She put on her most spectacular dress, the same one in which she had previously conquered him, checked that no one she knew would see her along the way, and was already standing at the hotel reception when the unexpected happened. Sorry, ma'am, your card doesn't go through, the administrator behind the counter said politely but coldly. It can't be, Lauren nervously pressed pay again, but the payment was rejected again. Her heart sank. She instantly remembered how she had recently cashed out a large sum. Maybe the bank mistook it for a fraudulent transaction and blocked it. This, in principle, happened. But in other circumstances, she would have immediately called the call center or transferred money from another account. Now her brain was frantically going through options. What if this is not a glitch? She tried to maintain her composure and turned to David, who was waiting by the elevator. David, she called in a low voice. The card is faulty. Can you pay? Instead of answering, he pursed his lips tightly and approached her, trying not to attract attention. Lauren, I don't want any problems, he said quietly but clearly. Maybe it's time for us to call it quits. What does not mean? She soared, but bit her voice so as not to raise her tone in front of everyone. It's just a glitch. I'll figure it out. She felt her knees shaking. David looked at her with concern. A couple of days ago, they were rejoicing at their dexterity, but now, it seemed, minor inconsistencies began to develop into something dangerous. He pulled out his wallet irritably, but remembering recent conversations about them being spotted in the office, he suddenly put it back. Look, I changed my mind. I really don't want any problems. Sorry, he said, and, waving his hand, headed towards the exit. Lauren froze for a moment, unable to believe that her lover would just leave like that, leaving her in front of the hotel administrator. However, outwardly she still retained the appearance of calm. Is the card faulty? Okay, she can urgently transfer money from the account of another card, but to do this, she needs to return home and log into the online bank. Lauren thought it wasn't that bad. Quickly flying out of the hotel, she sent a short message to David. Lauren, everything will work out. I'll call you back. There was no answer. On the way home, Lauren frantically dialed the bank's number, but all the lines were busy. She threw the phone on the passenger seat and nearly missed her turn. The thought was pounding in my head. Calm down. It's okay. This is just blocking by mistake. I'll fix everything. She entered the house, hoping that Will was still at work or locked in his office. She didn't want to explain why she came back so early. However, as she walked along the corridor, she saw a strip of light coming from under the living room door. So he's home. Lauren automatically straightened her hair and quietly crept into her room, trying not to attract attention. Then I turned on my laptop to log into my bank account and solve the problem. But instead of the usual welcome screen, she was greeted with a message: "Access blocked. Contact your system administrator." What nonsense, she muttered, tapping on the keyboard. Nothing has changed. It seemed that the system simply kicked her out into general nothing. She grabbed her phone to try it through the mobile app, only to discover a new surprise. Pop-ups and spam calls were literally choking the device. It was impossible to even enter a password. The screen blinked from overlapping advertising banners, and the phone vibrated tirelessly from incoming messages of dubious content. Damn, damn, Lauren hissed, clicking on the icons with growing panic. In addition, she tried to log into social networks, but none of her passwords worked. The system wrote that the account was reset, offering to go through the recovery procedure. Her hands began to tremble more strongly. This morning everything was fine, but now there is a complete blockage, as if someone had targeted all her entry points into the world. Calm down, calm down. Lauren took a deep breath, wondering, who could do this? The first thought was David. Maybe he decided to play it safe. But why? Or is this just a coincidence? Or Will? No, he can't do that. Suddenly, the phone issued a notification that a new message had been received. It came from an anonymous chat that Lauren had never seen before. Her hand reached out to open it, and a photograph flashed on the screen. Her own face, taken somewhere in the hotel corridor as she walked up to David. And under the photo, there is a short inscription: "Think you're being careful." A shiver ran down her spine. The date immediately caught my eye. The photo was taken just last week. But she is convinced that she always entered the hotel without attracting attention. Where did this photo come from? Who managed to do it and why? Oh my God, Lauren whispered. A feeling of horror came over her. It meant she was being followed. This means that someone could have accumulated a lot of incriminating evidence on her. And now he's blackmailing. But who? At that moment, she remembered that Will was in the next room. We must at least pretend that everything is okay and then urgently contact David. Or not, David himself returned, and what if he was up to something? Lauren, almost without breathing, left the bedroom and looked towards the living room. Will was sitting there on the couch. It seemed that he was not going to go anywhere, still the same level gaze that she so often underestimated. Will, hearing Lauren's quiet steps in the corridor, pretended to be engrossed in a book. In fact, his laptop, which was lying on the coffee table, still had a closed tab with a remote access console active. A few minutes ago, he had just watched Lauren panic when she saw that same photo on the screen. He felt neither joy nor anger, only bitter satisfaction that she had finally sensed reality. Everything went according to the plan that he carefully laid out. Blocking of bank cards, system failures, account resets are just the first steps that clearly demonstrate that Lauren's world is under threat. He did not want to destroy it completely, but wanted to show how easily a lie collapses when it is built on self-confidence. And so Lauren, accustomed to playing by her own rules, discovered that she had lost control in all areas at once. Hearing the creaking of the floor under his wife's feet, Will noticed her presence and turned around. "Have you returned yet?" he said with polite bewilderment in his voice. "Yes," Lauren answered shortly. She looked clearly alarmed. There is some kind of malfunction in our bank. My cards don't work." "Your cards? Strange." Will made an innocently surprised face. "Maybe I should call the bank." "I tried," she exclaimed a little louder than she should have. The phone is full of some kind of spam messages. Nothing works. Can you, can you give me yours? I'll try to call. Of course, he nodded, as if hesitating whether to pretend that the phone was dead. But in the end, he stood up, pulled the gadget out of his pocket, and handed it to her. Lauren wanted to take the phone, but suddenly changed her mind. What if something is installed there too? She felt scared at the thought that she would now call the bank, and then someone else would intercept this data. She understood that she looked stupid, but inside all her feelings were mixed into a lump. "Ah, thank you," she finally said and smiled awkwardly. "I'll probably try again from my home number." Will shrugged in response, indicating that he didn't mind. He returned to the sofa and picked up the book again. But behind the inconspicuous binding, he saw Lauren standing in the doorway, hesitating, not knowing what to say. Then she sighed resignedly and went into another room. Left alone, Lauren grabbed her smartphone again. The spam attack had subsided a little, and she managed to open the contacts menu. She wanted to call David, but hesitated. What would she tell him? "My cards are blocked. Someone is blackmailing me. Perhaps it's you." Sounds crazy. Instead, she decided to write a short message in the messenger they shared. But the icon for this application was also reset. The password did not work. Lauren randomly tried reset password, but the system asked for confirmation by email, and her access to email was also blocked. Perspiration ran down my forehead, my heart beat louder than a drum. Then she remembered that anonymous message. "Think you're being careful. Whoever it is clearly knows about her trips to the hotel. What if this person has already contacted David? Maybe that's why David was so nervous." "No, no, this is impossible," Lauren whispered, but she no longer heard the voice of self-confidence. She stood up and paced around the room, trying to think through some kind of strategy. "We need to at least unblock social networks," she thought, "or talk to the bank. Maybe everything can be fixed there." But the fear that they could see right through her, both here and there, haunted every movement. A thought arose in my head. What if it's Will? He understands cybersecurity. No, but why would he do that? Lauren felt cold inside. She remembered that her husband had been looking suspiciously calm lately, and once he looked at her with a strange, searching gaze. But she herself rejected the idea that he could resort to such digital terror. She always considered him a disciplined man, but not capable of such sophisticated methods of intimidation. Soon a second anonymous message arrived, and the phone vibrated so loudly that Lauren flinched. A photo of her car parked near the hotel appeared on the screen. The shot was taken from such an angle as if the photographer was hiding around a corner or behind another car. Below the photo is a short note. "How many other little things have you missed?" Oh my God. Lauren breathed, feeling her hands shaking even more. Everything indicated that the unknown person had collected a lot of evidence about her and was now pulling them out one by one. If this is banal blackmail, then a demand for money or something else will follow. But so far there are only mocking messages. "Do you think you're being careful?" And "How many other little things have you missed?" It looked as if someone was deliberately undermining her sense of security, step by step. Meanwhile, Will sat in the living room, occasionally glancing at the flickering of his laptop. The remote access program was still on the screen, showing Lauren helplessly poking at account locks and reading incoming photos. He made only a few precautionary moves. An hour would have been enough to completely hack her entire system, but he had prepared traps in advance, and now he only watched as her usual confidence crumbled. There was no gloating in his head, only a firm understanding that this could not continue like this. Lauren was spiraling into panic, and he watched it as an inevitable episode of revelation. He could have stopped the attack and removed the blocking at any time, but he didn't want to. Let her understand that her mistakes are much more serious than she thought. The time will soon come to explain, he thought, tapping his fingers on the cover of the book. Eventually, when she has exhausted all her moves, she will come to him, and she will no longer be sure that he is that naive husband who does not notice anything. Lauren couldn't unlock the laptop. Her phone remained full of spam, and anonymous messages kept coming. David was silent, and she didn't know what to do. Sitting on the edge of the bed, she remembered how just an hour ago she was planning to have a fun time at the hotel, thinking that she had covered her tracks perfectly. Now all her illusory security has crumbled. At that moment, the silence was broken by a dull knock on the door. Lauren jumped up. "Yes?" she asked, barely restraining herself from showing panic in her voice. The door opened slightly, and through the crack she saw Will's face. "Everything is fine. Don't you need help?" he asked calmly, almost with participation. Lauren swallowed the lump in her throat. Help. If she knew exactly where this threat was coming from, maybe she would have asked. But she still had no idea how to tell him about what was going on her phone and accounts. After all, then she will have to admit where she went and why. No, she managed. Just technical problems. I'll figure it out myself. Okay, Will responded. I'll be in the living room if anything happens. There was a slight hint of irony in his voice, but Lauren didn't notice. She sat looking at the phone screen, where a new notification had just arrived from an anonymous person. Do you think that's all? And realized that no matter where she went, she no longer felt protected. Lauren hasn't lived in peace for a long time, but the events of the last few days have crossed all imaginable boundaries. After her cards were blocked, a glitch in social networks and strange anonymous messages, she tried to restore order in her virtual life. She changed passwords, deleted old correspondence, installed new antiviruses, and even had to throw away her favorite smart bracelet, fearing that they might be spying on it. But it seemed that the more she tried to plug the holes, the worse the data leaks became. The first alarming blow was that intimate photos of her suddenly appeared in one closed forum. She recognized herself. These were shots that David had once taken at her request. They both laughed and said that no one will ever see them. Some unknown person, posting the pictures, did not forget to indicate that the lady is married and her lover is David from the next office. There were no last names, but still even a hint of this could deal a powerful blow to Lauren's reputation. How did they even get there? She asked in a broken voice, looking at the phone screen of her friend Mary. I don't know. Mary shrugged her shoulders in confusion. But the link spread very quickly. Many have already seen these pictures. Lauren was almost speechless from horror. She rushed to write to David, demanding an explanation. Lauren, why did you post our photos? Are you crazy? David, I? Never in my life. Do you think I want to get myself into trouble? She didn't believe him. Who else could have access to these frames besides herself and David? But at the same time, a suspicion crept inside. What if it's not David? After all, after the accounts were blocked, she had a feeling that there was something larger behind all this. The next blow came literally the next day. A short video surfaced in her company's corporate chat, apparently taken in the same hotel where Lauren and David met secretly. It was automatically sent under her name, accompanied by an ambiguous comment, as if written by Lauren herself. Of course, my colleagues were shocked. Some thought it was someone's wild joke, but many rushed to take screenshots before the message was deleted. What does this mean, Lauren? The boss squeezed out, calling her into the meeting room. Is this some kind of prank? A pornographic video suddenly flies into our general chat. I don't know. Lauren justified herself, almost crying. I was hacked, I swear. I would never send something like this. Colleagues who had previously looked at her with sympathy now cast sidelong glances. Conversations on the sidelines were in full swing. Lauren is cheating on her husband? Come on. I heard that she and David are having an affair. They hang out together somewhere, and I thought she was so decent. The gossip multiplied, and Lauren felt her world catastrophically narrowing. When her friends began to receive mass mailings from an address similar to her personal one, but slightly different by one letter in the domain in which Lauren allegedly admits to cheating and swears that she is ready to leave her husband for the sake of her lover, she realized that the situation was completely out of control. Her friends sent her screenshots of these letters asking, "Is this true? What's happened? Are you going to get a divorce?" Some were openly indignant, others asked to explain what was the matter. Damn, who does this? Lauren shouted into the void, clutching her smartphone in her hands. She understood that not a single VPN and not a single password change could save her from leaks. Lauren's reputation was bursting at the seams. She wanted to disappear, curl up in a ball, and not see anyone. Will still seemed to remain outwardly neutral. Either he was masterfully hiding his anger, or he really didn't know anything. But Lauren suspected more and more every day that it was he who could have pushed someone to carry out these hacks, who, besides Will, would have such a level of technical skills. In an effort to find out the truth and end the nightmare, Lauren decided that she had to talk to David in person when they met, in a safe place where no one would hear them. The irony was that she chose for conversation the same hotel where they were usually greeted as regular guests, albeit under false names. An ordinary room, an armchair, a floor lamp, a view from the window onto the gray streets. It's you. It's all you. Lauren gasped as soon as the door closed behind them. Her eyes burned with rage. David shuddered. What are you talking about? My photos, our videos. Everything ended up on the internet. My friends write that they are shaming me in the corporate chat. Wait, do you seriously think that I would leak something like that? David recoiled, looking at Lauren with hatred. By the way, my reputation is also at risk. Yes? So why then is everything stored on your cloud? I saw how you uploaded our photos. I downloaded them, but I deleted them later. I'm not suicidal. What's the point of putting them on public display? Lauren wanted to object, but everything was mixed inside her: fear, anger, disappointment. She continued to throw accusations. So now someone has hacked your cloud drive. Or did you specifically decide to leak the information in order to get rid of me? Are you crazy? David clenched his fists, barely containing his emotions. Why should I cut off all the paths? I, too, am losing everything I have. Do you think I'm pleased that now I'm ridiculed in the office for having an affair with someone else's wife? They almost started screaming, not suspecting that in the corner of the room, behind the TV, there was a small camera that recorded both video and sound. This is rare in ordinary rooms, but some people made sure in advance that their private meeting was documented that very evening. David began to make excuses. Yes, everything went wrong for me. You know, I was called on the carpet and asked why my corporate email was involved in some kind of scandal. I'm now on the verge of quitting myself. I know one thing. All these leaks are coming from somewhere on your side. Lauren muttered angrily. After all my passwords have been changed. All my devices are new. Listen, I don't need your hysterics, David snapped. Maybe this is your husband. He's a technical specialist, right? Lauren was silent for a moment. She felt a painful realization inside her. What if David is right? The scandal was gaining momentum. David, not wanting to completely ruin his relationship with Lauren, tried to remain restrained, but his own fear was obvious. He understood that, most likely, they had already been found out at work, and the office romance threatened to result in personnel sanctions. Lauren tossed between the desire to blame her lover for all sins and the panicked thought that it could be Will, and this meant that everything was going to hell. I need support, not your excuses, Lauren said, lowering her voice slightly. If it's not your fault, why can't you find the source of these leaks? I don't have such skills. I'm not a hacker, David snapped. I'm a manager. She sighed heavily. Her anger defied logic. Indeed, David did not seem capable of large-scale cyberattacks. He often complained that he could not even recover data from a hard drive without outside help. Then who? For a long time they exchanged mutual accusations, went through versions. It was done by an offended former employee, some rival in the office, an old enemy, and in general some kind of mafia. But none of these versions seemed at all plausible. Lauren nearly burst into tears. We must stop our meetings, David finally said, trembling with fatigue. Let's at least not give these leaks reasons. Are you suggesting that you just take me and leave me? She shuddered. I suggest you understand that now all our contacts are an additional risk, he explained in a calmer tone. Perhaps later, when everything calms down. Lauren silently grabbed her bag and stormed out of the room, slamming the door. She didn't want to listen any further, but deep down she was afraid that David was right. Their affair was only making things worse. Now that videos and photos are already spreading across the internet, each meeting can provide new reasons for blackmail or public shame. The red light on the recording device clicked softly as Lauren left. The camera continued to film as David paced restlessly around the room for several minutes, muttering under his breath before finally following her out. All this was caught on tape: his words, her screams, their mutual accusations, voiced out loud. The material is quite sufficient to drive both of them even deeper into a mud scandal if someone has the desire to publish this recording. Lauren walked home slowly that evening. On the one hand, she was furious about the fight with David. On the other hand, she suspected that David might not have been lying. Whoever manages this iceberg of compromising evidence, he does it professionally, knowing all its weak points and ways of escape. But no one, except Will, knew 100% all her habits, routes, devices. In addition, both the blocking of cards and the hacking of the laptop were too targeted, as if directed specifically against her. However, Lauren could not imagine that her husband was so cold-blooded and vindictive. She knew his kindness, remembered the years of life together, his calm support in everyday life. Is he capable of this? She thought. And why? If he had known, wouldn't he have made a scandal right in his face? But logic suggested otherwise. Just a person with his experience could methodically and imperceptibly break down all its virtual walls. The next day, Lauren, against all odds, went to the office again. The buzz of gossip was palpable. Colleagues whispered and cast sidelong glances at her. She was lucky that there was no reason to formally fire her, but the atmosphere became suffocating. Plucking up her courage, she tried to talk to her boss. "I need help with a break-in," Lauren said, trying to keep her voice level. "Please contact the IT department or security service so that they can conduct a check." The boss frowned. "You understand that this is a scandal, right? Reputational risk for the company. I'll report this to the top. But if it turns out that all this is your carelessness—" "Yes, I know," Lauren interrupted her. "But I can't solve this on my own." She left the office with a slightly lighter heart. At least she had taken a step towards an official investigation. But she understood that this could only anger the mysterious puppeteer, whoever he was, more. Will all this time, remaining in the shadows, saw how his blows drove his wife into a corner. He did not post anything online that could physically threaten her safety, but he pushed the situation towards a resolution. With each new leak, Lauren argued louder with David and tried more and more actively to find salvation in changing the passwords. However, Will knew that as soon as she entered a new password on her usual device, the spyware would immediately send the data to him. For now, he was in no hurry to reveal himself openly. Why? Perhaps to let her feel what it's like to live a lie and fear discovery every minute. Or to wait for the right moment, when the whole truth will be revealed as noisily as possible and she will not be able to get out. Or maybe there was a glimmer of hope in Will's soul that she herself would come to him with a confession. But everything indicated that Lauren was persistently looking for a reason on the side. A couple of days later, another scandal broke out in the same hotel. Lauren and David finally decided to meet to find out what was happening after the last leaks. She swore not to go there, but they no longer had any other place where they could have at least a little privacy. And again, an irreparable mistake, because the room was equipped with a hidden camera. David, of course, didn't know about this, and neither did Lauren. "It's definitely not me," David argued for the 100th time, nervously walking around the room. "Maybe someone intercepted my photos when I connected to public Wi-Fi. Who knows?" "Who cares?" Lauren waved it off. "Now everyone thinks I'm some kind of loose swindler. Photos, videos. They even send such nasty letters to their girlfriends. And I get it too, believe me," David snapped. "I'm on the verge of being fired. The bosses have already held a conversation, hinting that discreditable behavior. Maybe they should just go to hell somewhere until everything calms down." This conversation again took place in a raised tone, with mutual claims and fear in the voice. Both understood that their relationship had become too dangerous, and yet they could not separate completely. Either passion or addiction or habit kept them together. They had no idea that their every step and every word was being recorded again, and these recordings could be included in the next wave of leaks. The camera blinked peacefully with a tiny light hidden behind a panel in the corner of the ceiling. Below is the scene that unfolds on the day when all the secrets come to light and Lauren's life is turned upside down. The text focuses on the tough, raw conversation between husband and wife. Without getting ahead of ourselves, we only show tonight when Lauren bursts home crying and will finally emerges from the shadows. There are no future consequences or further steps here, only the emotional outcome of their relationship at this particular moment. The text is approximately 2,000 words long and contains frank, cutting dialogue that captures the tension of the moment. Lauren yanked the front door open, not even bothering to close it behind her. She was breathing heavily, her breath labored from crying and rage. The noise of her heels echoed in the empty hallway. Somewhere in the back of the house, there was a light on, most likely in the living room. The tears that she did not have time to wipe away left streaks on her carefully painted cheeks. Wet marks on her face indicated that she had been crying in the car and was now on the verge of a nervous breakdown. "Will," she shouted from the doorway. "Will, where are you?" In response, a smooth voice came from the living room. "I'm here." She almost ran into the room, barely catching her breath. Will was sitting on the sofa in his usual position, his back straight, his hands resting calmly on his knees, and not the slightest sign of fuss. On the table in front of him stood a plate with half-eaten dinner and a cup of black coffee. He looked up at Lauren and, noticing her condition, arched his eyebrows subtly. But there was no sympathy in his eyes, more like a cold calm. "Are you kidding me?" she exploded, seeing him so calm. "I'm all on my nerves, like I'm on a volcano, and you're sitting here like nothing's happening." He didn't answer. He only slightly moved his head, as if inviting her to continue. Lauren felt how all the emotions inside were mixed into one lump rushing out. Fear, anger, despair. This is all because of you?" she shouted, stammering. "My career is in the ass. I was essentially fired. Her friends look at her like she's the last creature. And you sit here and pretend that you don't care." "I don't pretend that I don't care," he answered quietly. "I just don't see the point in putting on a show." "Play?" She took a step forward, clenching her fists. "Yes, my life just went to hell. And if you are not pretending to be a complete idiot, then you will admit that it was you who organized everything, that you hacked my accounts and sent out these videos, that you destroyed me with your hacking or whatever." Will, without changing his position, frowned as if assessing the extent to which she had reached. His voice remained surprisingly calm. "Destroyed you. Interesting wording. Haven't you yourself turned your life into a dump of lies?" "Shut up." Lauren shouted it unconsciously, but did not regret the harshness. "Don't you dare talk to me like that. I have the right to know why you interfered in my personal life." "Personal life?" He said it slowly, almost mockingly. "Let's call a spade a spade. You decided to have sex with David behind my back. Then you thought you were cunning enough not to leave a trace. And now you're shocked that you were stabbed in the back earlier than you expected." This brutal directness left Lauren momentarily speechless. Never before had Will allowed himself such harsh words. He usually chose neutral formulations, was polite, and sometimes dry. But now, it seems, all the masks have been dropped. I thought. She almost choked on her tears. "I thought you would try to forgive me, or, I don't know, start a scandal. And you just ruin my whole life?" "Why not?" He tilted his head slightly to the side. "You didn't hesitate when in your double life you were only thinking about how to hide something. So it is quite logical that, having learned the truth, I decided not to cry into my pillow, but to act differently." She was shaking with indignation. "How dare you? I'm human. I have feelings too." The voice broke into a squeal. "You didn't have the right to set me up like that, disgrace me in front of the whole office, leak my intimate photos. Don't you understand that this is worse than any scandal? This is disgusting, vile. She frantically ran her hand over her face, smearing the streaks of mascara. This is not an option, Will. This is disgusting. Will smiled wryly. Disgusting. Maybe, but it is effective. While you consider yourself a queen who twirls me as she pleases, I was accumulating facts. You know, there is such a military tactic. Do not hit the enemy head on, but wait until he gets bogged down in his own mistakes, and strike at the most painful moment. So I'm your enemy? Lauren exclaimed in despair. Who do you think you are to me? He responded sarcastically. A faithful wife who, completely by chance, spends nights in hotels, erases correspondence, lies to her face. She took a deep breath, trying to somehow pull herself together, but a volcano was seething inside. I thought, she began, choking on tears, that you and I were not an ideal couple, but you would never stoop to such baseness. Will stood up from the sofa, throwing away the book that was lying next to him. He turned out to be half a head taller than her, and this gave his gaze from top to bottom a particularly cold expression. Meanness, he hissed. Don't you realize what you yourself have done? I was faithful to you. I did not meddle in your luxurious life. I turned a blind eye to your endless spending. I was even glad that you could enjoy yourself. But in response, I received lies and dirt. Why should I maintain knightly nobility? Because, damn it, because we have been together for many years, Lauren shouted, clenching her fists. Because you once swore that you would love me. And now you are killing me, my reputation, my job, all my connections. Yes, I'll stay on the street, you know. You know, I used to believe in loving to the end, he continued calmly. Until I saw you arching in front of your David, he spat out his lover's name in disgust. And you thought I was too stupid to understand. Did you want risk, adventure? Well, here you go. She stepped towards him, her face flushed with anger. Oh, you, son of a bitch. Did you plan all this on purpose? From the very beginning, he installed cameras and watched me through my own phone. Of course, he snapped. It was enough to press a couple of buttons in the firmware, and that's it. Your dear VPN, your security, is an empty phrase. You yourself didn't notice how you gave me all the passwords. And your girlfriends, who love to joke, also gladly gave me a bunch of piquant details. Lord, how can you be so cruel? Lauren hit the wall nearby with her fist, hurting her knuckles. I have no one now. No career, no friends, no damn money, everything is frozen. Will crossed his arms over his chest and looked into her eyes coldly. It's amazing how little you understood me. After all, you knew about my past, that I know how to work in the shadows. But apparently, she thought that I was too quiet and boring to dare to do anything. Yes, Lauren? Fuck you, she shouted, breaking into a scream again. I didn't deserve such shame anyway. It would be better if you kicked me out of the house right away than to show my naked photos to everyone. I do as I see fit, he snapped. If I kicked you out, would you go to your David, cry, find a new victim? No, really. You yourself destroyed our marriage, and now you have received a natural result. You see who you really are and how quickly all the friends turn away when they see your true face. My friends, Lauren repeated bitterly, realizing that many had really turned away. But you could talk, you could say that you know everything, you could. Oh, talk, he laughed, and there was not a drop of fun in this laugh. For what? Hear another stream of your lies? See how you get out of it, pretending to be offended by innocence? No, thanks. Do you know how much time I watched you, hoping that you would come to your senses? But you went further and further, so she deserved something else. Lauren stood with her back pressed against the wall, realizing that she was no longer comfortable in this house, as if it was no longer her home. She wanted to throw herself at Will, cling to him, and then burst into tears from despair. You're a bastard, she hissed through her tears. Yes, it's my fault that I fell in love with someone else, but I didn't do it out of spite. I just didn't have enough attention, and you killed everything I had, and you dare to say that I myself deserved it. Killed? He added harshness to his voice, which made her shudder. Don't exaggerate. You are alive and well. But your beautiful sign that everything is under control, yes, it was destroyed. So are you happy now? Do you think you've won? She challenged me. No, I'm not happy, he responded gloomily. But I don't intend to shed tears for you either. What did you expect? That I will lie at your feet and ask you to come back? You yourself always didn't care about me. You lived your glamorous, I want another handbag. And now you're surprised that the husband you thought was a waste of space has suddenly taken over. Lauren tried to answer something, but all that came out was a groan. Tears flowed in streams, and she felt that all the words were stuck in her throat. It's not you, she repeated like a spell. You were never cruel, Will. You have always been kind, and I really didn't think it would go this far. A person changes when he is betrayed, he lashed with words like a whip. Perhaps I really have become different, and now there is no turning back for you. They stood opposite each other like two opponents who have too much in common, but who can no longer find a compromise. Looking at Lauren, Will saw the woman he had once loved, and now she looked pathetic and confused. Looking at Will, Lauren saw a cold avenger whom she did not know at all. Where is David? She suddenly blurted out, trying to change the subject to the most obvious culprit of her downfall. He disappeared today. Did you remove it? I heard that his company canceled the contract. Is this also your doing? Will paused for a second and answered without expression. I didn't touch anything. I just gave employers a couple of tidbits about the impeccable manager. This was enough for them to get rid of the scoundrel. Whether he disappeared on his own or with your help, I don't care. Lauren sobbed, pressing her hand to her lips. This means it's true David was left without a job. Perhaps he was scared or decided to go into hiding so as not to get burned in this scandal. Deep down, she felt gloating and guilty at the same time. You crushed both me and him, she said in a whisper, turning her gaze to the floor. For what? To prove that you are stronger? To show you that I see much more in the shadows than you think, he replied with a straight face. And yes, I'm not going to make excuses. You cheated on me, I'm done with you in the form in which you existed. Everything is natural. She bit her lip until it bled to keep from crying out loud. Gathering up the last of her pride, she squeezed out. So, is this the end? Are you going to kick me out of the house now? Will you at least let me pack my things? You can collect whatever you want, he nodded, looking straight into her eyes. I won't throw anything into the street. I'm not a barbarian, but keep in mind, your accounts are frozen. All common assets are also under my control. Don't rely too much on credit cards, remember. They have been blocked for a long time. So if you want to live further, you will have to look for a way out yourself. What? So you're leaving me without money, without everything? She sobbed again, feeling the ground disappear from under her feet. It's quite logical. I won't finance your further whims, he explained briefly, and no one is forcing you to leave today. But I don't think you'll want to stay close to me after all this. You are cruel, she whispered, trembling all over. And I'm to blame too, but, God, how disgusting it all is. Well, take it as a fact. Now you have a rare opportunity to start life anew, he said coldly. Without your husband, whom you called boring, without your lover, who ran away, there was a slight smell of frying. Without friends who turn away at the first scandal. Did you want new emotions? Congratulations, you got them? Lauren shook her head, unable to stop herself from sobbing. No, all this is wrong. I just wanted love, attention, and you turned it all into a nightmare. Love? He bared his teeth contemptuously. You don't have to lie to yourself, at least. You were looking for wit and chic, but you considered me a purse and a fool who could be led by the nose. She covered her face with her hands, realizing that there was some truth in Will's words. Once upon a time, perhaps, she really saw him only as a convenient husband, not expecting that he was capable of such deceit. I don't know what to do now. She looked around the room, in which everything reminded her of her past measured life. A feeling of hopelessness washed over her like a wave. I'm scared, Will. I have nothing left. And do you seriously expect pity? he said and came almost close to her. Do you think I'll take you in my arms, console you, and bring everything back? Maybe at least some drop of sympathy, she whispered, looking into his eyes. His look in response was chilling. Sympathy. You cheated on me, made me look like a complete idiot in my own home. And now that everything has been revealed, do you want me to feel sorry for you? I'm not omnipotent. I'm just a man you betrayed. And I'm certainly not going to brush away your tears and say that everything is fine. Nothing's good, Lauren, neither for you nor for me. She couldn't stand it and took a step back, pressing herself against the wall, as if there was a way out of the situation. But the walls were silent, and there was no way out. Damn, she blurted out. Well, okay, thank you for at least giving me time to pack my things. Will did not answer, but simply watched with a frown as she, trembling, tried to somehow save face. In her heart, Lauren understood that their conversation had long gone beyond all limits. Each said something that poisoned them further. The bridges seemed to have been burned. Tears rolled down non-stop, and he stood like a stone wall. Finally, Lauren recovered a little. Fine, I will go to my place. I need to collect my thoughts. Will nodded. Do what you want. I don't care. She lowered her eyes, cast a last glance at him. There was disgust and fear and pleading, but he did not flinch. Lauren turned around and, hunched over, moved towards the exit of the living room. She did not close the door, and in the silence her sobs and steps could be heard moving away along the corridor. Will was left alone. He took a deep breath, sat down on the sofa, and closed his eyes for a moment. There was no rejoicing in his soul, only the acute awareness that he had really taken extreme measures. And yes, he did not see any other way, because he did not need words that she would no longer believe. His choice was to crush everything in one fell swoop, and he did it. Somewhere in the house, Lauren was already quietly sobbing. Her previous illusions were shattered, her career was dead, her friends turned away, and even her money was frozen. The lover who became the catalyst for all these changes has disappeared, and Will, her ex-military cybersecurity expert husband, now stood over the wreckage of their marriage, coldly watching her writhe under the weight of the consequences. Lauren woke up in her old bedroom, but now everything looked alien and hostile. The sheets seemed icy, and a woman with a devastated look was reflected in the mirror. During a night full of tears and insomnia, she realized that even the opportunity to stay in this house was only a temporary indulgence on Will's part. The same Will whom she considered quiet and reliable, but it turned out that he could be ruthless, like an experienced fighter. She quietly went out into the corridor, on tiptoe, as if afraid to run into her husband. But the house was empty. No sound, no movement. Once she had so appreciated the silence that enveloped the luxurious walls, but now this silence got on her nerves. The air seemed to smell of indifference, and every object, be it a crystal vase or a soft rug, reminded of the pleasant life that Lauren had taken for granted in the past. In the living room, she noticed an envelope on the table. There were documents inside. Cork with the state emblem and large letters, Declaration of Divorce. The front page reported that Will Carlisle was filing for divorce. Attached was an impressive package of papers and several notarized copies so that there was no doubt. The accompanying handwritten note contains a short phrase, "You know why." Lauren felt like everything inside her was falling into a bottomless pit. Reality has finally dawned on her. He not only exposed her affair, he goes all the way, depriving her of the very foundation on which her previous comfort rested. Until recently, she thought that her angry husband would calm down or at least leave some of her property behind her, but now she realized there was no chance. Essentially, everything, the house, the car, the bills, was registered on his part as general or corporate assets, and her contribution was never documented. But there is clear evidence of her betrayal and moral damage. Will's lawyers will do their job. She dropped the papers on the table and tried to take a deep breath. Only without hysterics, she thought, but her knees began to shake, and she had to lean on the back of the chair. Over the years of marriage, she became accustomed to luxury, a new wardrobe for every season, expensive parties, vacations in five-star hotels. Will finance it all. Yes, sometimes she believed that she was controlling him, but now she understood that he only allowed her to play this game. Suddenly, there was a click in the hallway. Someone opened the front door. Lauren twitched. Her heart skipped a beat. She didn't know what to say if it was Will. True, I didn't have time to think of a word because he himself entered the living room with a suitcase in his hand. So you read it? He asked calmly, nodding towards the papers. It took her a while to find her voice. Will, are you really filing for divorce straight away? What's suddenly here? He put the suitcase near the sofa. You yourself said yesterday that I destroyed your life. It is logical that I am no longer going to save the marriage. But Lauren tried to find at least some argument, at least a grain of hope. Maybe we could, I don't know, discuss it like civilized people. Without trial, without dirt, he just raised an eyebrow. The dirt is already through the roof, don't you think? I'm guilty, she stammered, realizing how pitiful her words sounded. But is divorce final? Is it really impossible to try? At least to come to an agreement. We already agreed, Will snapped. You will receive some of your personal belongings and can find where to live. The house, car, etc. will remain with me. Financial accounts, too. My lawyers will formalize everything. You won't have a chance to challenge it after all the incriminating evidence that has accumulated. She blinked away the tears that had come. So you didn't prepare yesterday or the day before. Did you decide everything a long time ago? A long time ago, he confirmed. I saw your lies, Lauren, and waited until you went so far that I had complete control. You gave it to me yourself with each of your new secret dates. Think, she whispered, although she understood that she was talking to the wall. We've had years together. Maybe you'll at least leave me a car. Or, I won't even be able to get a job now. My entire reputation is trampled on. I thought about my reputation before, he said ruthlessly. There was an opportunity to stop, but you chose something else. Lauren lowered her head. She once believed that she could always rely on his money and patience, and now she's asking him for handouts. Inside there is shame and powerlessness, and a strange realization. All this time, it was not I who was the mistress of the situation, but he. Okay? She squeezed out, barely maintaining the remnants of her composure. If I can't change anything, at least tell me. Are you leaving now? Will nodded towards the suitcase. Yes, I'm leaving for the hotel. No one will look askance at me there. And I give you a day to collect everything you consider necessary. If you want, live here for 24 hours. If you want, leave immediately. The house will then be closed. She was silent, barely breathing. In this short period of time, her life has changed beyond recognition. Not a shadow remains of the self-confident woman she was just a few weeks ago. You don't even want to hear my explanations, she suddenly asked. He shook his head. I'm tired of your explanations. Everything has been clear to me for a long time. And believe me, I will not accept any new excuses. A bitter smile trembled on Lauren's lips. Do you, at least, hate me? Or don't you care? I may have hated you for a while, Will answered in a toneless voice. But now, no, rather, I feel empty. You no longer exist for me. With every word he said, she understood. He was acting decisively, without a hint of compassion. She has driven herself into a trap, and there is no way out. Lauren stared at him desperately, trying to find something familiar about this man. But Will's gaze became alien. So that's it, she whispered. We're done. Yes, he confirmed evenly. I'm leaving Lauren, and I won't look back. He picked up the suitcase and walked past her, almost hitting her with his shoulder. Lauren stood there as if paralyzed. Somewhere in the depths of her soul, she wanted to call out to him, ask him to stop, but her tongue did not obey. She heard only the roar of blood in her ears and the growing noise of despair. For the first time in her life, she didn't know where to go or who to ask for help. Will's footsteps echoed in the empty corridor. Then the front door slammed. The silence became even more acute, saturated with hopelessness. Lauren slowly knelt down on the marble floor, dropping the divorce papers from her hands. She could only sit and watch as the sheets of paper were scattered on the floor, shattering her old life into dust. All these years, she thought she was in control of Will, in control of the situation. But it turned out the other way around. He controlled her. He endured, did not show that he saw her duplicity, and waited for the moment. And when he pulled the rug out from under her feet, he did it mercilessly, depriving her of status, finances, and support from loved ones in one fell swoop. Was she expecting a different ending? Maybe deep down she was always afraid of something like this. Now Lauren was left in this house that was no longer her home, among things that no longer belonged to her. Tears flowed in streams, but no one could stop them. She didn't hear the phone going silent in one of the neighboring rooms with endless spam messages about blocked accounts. She did not notice how the sunlight slides along the walls, turning into evening shadows. All these little things no longer matter. It's over, she thought, clinging to the smooth floor with her fingers, as if in the hope of regaining her balance. Her world is empty, and only a trembling strip of the last light remains in the doorway. Somewhere on the street, a car honked, probably the one that was taking Will away. He left and didn't look back. He no longer needed to look back. He had planned everything and achieved his goal. And Lauren, finding herself in the wreckage of her shattered life, suddenly realized that the words "the end" were sometimes much more literal than all her previous conversations about love and marriage. This is how the story ended. Will filed for divorce first, took the house, car, bills, and disappeared in an unknown direction, not even bothering to say goodbye. Lauren now has no illusions that she will ever regain her former power. She is broken and forced to admit. All this time they controlled her, and she did not control her husband. And when he decided to leave, he left without ever looking back. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even click to the next one.